All right, our second keynote speaker today is Ron Garan, who is a highly decorated NASA astronaut, fighter pilot, and active social entrepreneur who believes that appropriately designed and targeted social enterprise can solve many of the problems facing our world. Ron has spent 178 days in space and has traveled more than 7 million miles during 2,842 orbits of our planet. Ron also spent 18 days at the bottom of the ocean during a research mission held in the world's only undersea research lab, Aquarius. That sounds like something from a future city competition that you guys would have come up with. Ron was also later assigned to the U.S. Agency for International Development, leading the Unity Node project. This project's task was to develop a universal open source platform enabling humanitarian organizations to work toward mutual goals. In 2007, Ron co-founded Mana Energy Limited, created with the goal of leveraging the carbon market to finance humanitarian projects. Mana is the first organization in the world to register for United Nations Clean Development Mechanism carbon credit program for water treatment. I am sure I have only touched on all of Ron's accomplishments. There's a silver lining of COVID, is that he's able to join us today. And so now I turn it over to Ron.
Well, hi. Thanks, Catherine. Can you guys see me?
We can.
Okay, super. Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. And hi, everybody. I'm really impressed with this this competition that you're all in. I think it's really important. And maybe I just want to touch on upfront some of what you heard in my introduction. Some of the things that I've been very fortunate to to participate in, and starting back when I first joined the military, I flew in combat in Operation Desert Storm, which actually tomorrow, I believe, is the 30th anniversary of the end of that war. I had to eject from an F-16, less than a second before I would not have survived. Flew in space with both the Russians on a Soyuz spacecraft and a U.S. space shuttle. Lived for 6 months on the International Space Station. Did 4 spacewalks, and as you heard, lived on the bottom of the ocean. And in all of those situations, they were in hostile environments, and environments where there was danger involved. They were situations where I had to isolate from my friends and loved ones and family. There was sacrifice required, and that should sound familiar to everybody because we're all living in that right now. We are all living in a hostile environment where it can be somewhat dangerous to just walk out the door because of COVID. We're in a situation where we need to make sacrifices. We're in a situation where we have to isolate from friends and loved ones. And I think the difference between those two, all the experiences that I've had and the experience in right now, is that mine was voluntary. So I chose to do all those things. We don't have a choice but live in the world right now with COVID. But the reason why I made those choices and faced the danger and made those sacrifices and put myself into those situations is because there was a benefit. There was a risk-benefit trade-off. I realized that putting myself in potential danger had a payback, not only for me personally, but for the world, for the community and the world. And I think even though we don't have a choice whether or not we are going to live in the COVID world, we do have a choice with what we do with that. We do have a choice with whether or not we can benefit from the price that we're already paying, from the sacrifices that we're already making. And, I don't have to tell you all what the sacrifices are. You know them firsthand, and we've been living with this for almost a year now. But what we have is an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to come out the other side of this crisis stronger, more resilient, more unified. And what the experiences of flying in space taught me is when I looked back at the Earth and I saw this incredibly beautiful, indescribably iridescent ecosystem teeming with life, this beautiful, fragile oasis hanging in the blackness of space, I really had this sense of unity, unity of our planet, unity of all of humanity, unity of all the life forms on our planet. And I think we have an opportunity to walk away from the COVID crisis with a greater sense of unity. We have this cliche, we're all in the same boat, we're all in this together. And those are cliches, but just because they're cliches doesn't mean it's not true. And with COVID-19, this is probably the first time in history where the entire world, everyone on the planet, is living, is all in the same boat, is living through an undeniably, connected world. There's literally not a single person on the planet that's not affected by COVID in one way or the other. And so we have an opportunity to see that unity, see the unity that's very clear and undeniable from space, and to apply that apply that truth of our underlying unity in everything that we do. And so there's so many, we can look at this time of physical separation from our friends and our loved ones in some cases, as an opportunity too, because it hopefully will never come again. And so, if you're spending more time with your family, that's your immediate family, that's something that you should cherish, because that's not necessarily always going to be the case. There's so many things that we can express gratitude for just the day-to-day life that we have right now that may or may not be there when this is all over. So I just encourage everybody to look for opportunities to grow, to mature, to learn, and to come out the other side of this a better person than we all went in. And we should all get a COVID-19 mission patch, I think. for everything that we've gone through. But I do want to stop there because I do want to make sure that there's enough time for questions and answers.
Ron, some of the questions we received are based on what is the most exciting thing? We're able to see the face of Mars, which is crazy right now. But what are you doing what you do? What are you most excited about as far as innovation? And where do you think, one, what are you most excited about? And two, if you could give kids like a direction to start their, to go down, where would you send them?
Yeah. So I guess in the first question, is that specific to space?
No, I mean, whether it be underseas or space, when I was their age, I couldn't imagine seeing the face of the moon or the face of Mars.
Yeah.
So just kind of what is possible.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I hope in space exploration is that we develop a transportation infrastructure between the Earth and our closest neighbor, the moon. And by creating that infrastructure, we then have a permanent human presence on the moon, which leads to a permanent human presence on Mars, which leads to us being able to explore the rest of the solar system. And I think that's well within our capabilities. I think there would be tremendous benefits to the Earth by particularly establishing a presence on the moon. There's many benefits to Earth. There's resources on the moon. There's energy on the moon. There's science that we can conduct on the moon. And I also hope that in the near future, in the next decade or so, that space travel becomes as commonplace as air travel. And I think we're on a trajectory that could possibly happen. And then the advice, the second part of your question on the advice, I think the best advice I can give is to seek out, find something that you truly, truly love to do and be the very, very best you can be at it. And if you want to be an astronaut, then that's good advice for that too, because what all the astronauts have in common is they have excelled in their chosen field. And astronauts come from, a wide variety of different walks of life and professions. We have, doctors and teachers and veterinarians and chemists and pilots and scientists and engineers. All kinds of professions have entered into the astronaut corps. And as I said, what they all have in common is that they have excelled in their chosen field. And one of the secrets to being able to excel in your field is to be in a field that you truly love to do. You will naturally excel at it. And you should find a profession, find a career where you enjoy going to work every day, you enjoy what you're doing, and you would probably do it even if you weren't getting paid. That's kind of the, one of the secrets of a happy life is finding that niche, that career path that you really love.
Our next question came from one of our students, and they asked, they said they know that there's other, specifically Jim Lovell was also a pilot in the Air Force. So would you say it's common for NASA astronauts to have some sort of pilot aviation background?
At the moment, it's probably 50-50. About 50% of the current astronaut corps were military pilots. Don't quote me on that. It's not an exact percentage, but I would guess about 50%. I think that will probably change as time goes on. I think it'll probably be less because the skill set that's needed will not be. You will not have to be a test pilot. Actually, 50% are probably military test pilots, and which is even a more specific group. And so you're always going to need folks to fly the spaceships, but the more we do in space, the more we'll be able to do in space, and the wider the variety of skill sets, of tasks, of backgrounds that we're going to need in the space program.
Another question I had was, could you speak, you kind of talked a little bit about, about the COVID struggle, but could you just speak to how, there's physical limitations and physical challenges that you meet as through all your endeavors, and then also mental, and kind of just speak to like what some of each of them have been and how you've worked through them?
Yeah, I mean, physical and mental are together. They can't separate them. So one of the things, we at times get put in very stressful environments in the space program. We train and prepare. So the first part of the answer is you have to prepare. So what we do at NASA is we think of every possible thing that can go wrong, and then we have a plan that's ready to go in case that happens. And we train for more than we think is going to happen to us. And so like we do survival training out in the wilderness. We do cold weather survival training, where it's really, really, really cold. We do underwater training. We do all this. We do emergency training. Probably 80% of what we do is training for things that we'll probably never do, the emergency training. So preparation is a really big part of it. Being prepared for what could happen. But as you're preparing, you need to focus on what you can control. And so what happens is a lot of times stress builds up in folks that are either preparing things or doing things because they're overwhelmed by all these things that could happen, right? But if you have prepared and you're ready for it, then you know that you've done everything that's within your control. And so what we tend to do is focus on things that are outside of our control, and there's no sense worrying about something that you don't have control over. So we should put 100% of our focus on those things that we have actual control over, and do the very best we can with those. And I think once you get rid of all the energy that's expended on worrying and concentrating and focusing on things that you don't have any control over, it frees up so much of your energy and your intellect and everything else to handle the things that you actually do have control over. So those are two pieces of advice I'd give.
Oh, that's great. We have a couple more questions coming in. One question is, if we had more than one moon, how would it affect space travel?
How would it affect space travel? Well, it would affect a lot of things on Earth. The sky would look different. The tides would be different. It would change some of the math, if you will, that's needed for being in orbit and orbital mechanics. Yeah, I think those are the big things that it would do. Obviously, we'd have a lot more to explore that would be in our backyard, which would be pretty cool.
Oh, great. We had another question. How complex is it to fly a space shuttle, and was it mainly controlled from the ground, or did you manually fly it?
Yeah, it is a very, very complex, complicated vehicle. And I mean, when I first came to NASA and started studying the space shuttle, I just was blown away by how complicated it was. How many switches, how many systems, how many subsystems. It was probably still is the most complicated, complex, flight vehicle ever designed and created. And what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry, Catherine.
How much did you fly manually, and how much is
Oh,
controlled by the ground?
yeah. So on launch, 100% of that was automatic. I mean, there were some switches that we'd have to throw here and there, but what we were constantly doing on the launch was preparing for what would happen next, thinking about, okay, if an engine fails now, what are we going to do? And if things went wrong, then we would step in really quickly and potentially be flying it manual at that point. The rendezvous and the docking to the space station is all done manual. The landing is all done manual. We take over flying just when we go, shortly after we go subsonic is when we start flying the space shuttle, and we fly it all the way to landing and wheel stop on the runway. When we undock from the space station, again, that's manual, and then we do a fly around the top of the basically a loop around the space station, and that's all done manually as well.
How would you say, Ron, that being in space compares to the undersea time you spent?
Well, there's similarities. In both cases, it's a hostile environment. And what I mean by that is we are completely dependent on our life support systems for our very survival. A difference is that on the undersea mission, I got to know my neighbors, and we had a lot of neighbors. It was in a beautiful coral reef. Another difference is, although you're floating, and we can adjust our buoyancy underwater to be, I'm putting quotations here, weightless. We're not actually weightless, but we're not going up and we're not going down in whatever part of the water we're in. But when you turn upside down underwater, you feel like you're upside down. When you turn upside down in space, there is no upside down. So there is no difference between your feet pointing at the earth or your feet pointing away from the earth as far as how it feels. Blood doesn't rush to your head when you're upside down. When we train for spacewalks, and I've had the opportunity to do 4 of them, which is a really amazing experience. But most of that training is underwater in a gigantic pool in Houston called the NBL, the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, where there's a full-scale mock-up of the space station in the pool. It's 40 feet deep. And when you practice there, it's interesting because, like I said, when you turn upside down, you feel upside down. And so there is a gravity vector, right? The gravity always points to the bottom of the pool. And so when you're navigating, and we call it spacewalking, but we're not actually walking, we're using our hands and using handrails. When you're navigating from one point of the space station to the other, you have this part of your navigation system, if you will, being gravity, pointing to the bottom of the pool. When you get to space, you don't have that part of the navigation system anymore because you don't feel upside down. So it's something that you really need to get used to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you, kind of back to your other question, one of our students asked, would you say that astronauts have a hope for the best, prepare for the worst mentality?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, definitely prepare for the worst. And I would hope maybe we're confident in the best is a better way to put that. We're not just leaving it to hope. It's because we prepared for the worst that we're confident that the best will turn out.
Also, so from your perspective now, Ron, from when you were a child, what do you think was most strikingly different as far as your perspective of space has been?
I think one of the big things was when I got to spaces, and I saw from the first time with my own eyes how thin the atmosphere was. And I was selected as an astronaut in 2000. I didn't fly in space till 2008. So I spent 8 years training to fly in space. And that was 8 years of mission after mission after mission, coming back, and we get a debrief on how the mission went, and every single person saying, you're not going to believe how thin the atmosphere is. And when I launched to space, I had this expectation that the atmosphere was going to be really thin. But when I got there, it just blew me away how thin it was. And there's no doubt when you see that with your own eyes that we as humans could put stuff up into that atmosphere that causes damage. And when we look at the sky from the ground, it looks like the big blue sky, but it is not the big blue sky. It is a really, really thin layer of air that separates us from the rest of the universe.
Ron, what would you say if you were a middle schooler, or maybe you have middle school children, what would you say would be most important for them to keep in mind based on this thinness of the atmosphere? How can they relay that and focus on it?
Well, what I would say is that all of us, no matter what grade we're in or where we are incredibly powerful. I mean, every action that we do ripples out and affects everything else. And that's environmentally, socially, everything else is that we create a tremendous impact. And where our world will be 100,000 years from now, and where it would have been had we not been here, each and every one of us, is going to be vastly different. So it's something that really is amazing to think about, is that every single person on the planet is incredibly important, and they're making an incredible impact, either positive or negative. And so what we should try and do, and what I try and do, is every day when I lay my head on my pillow at the end of the day, I think about, did I make more positive inputs or negative inputs to the trajectory of the world? And if the answer is I've made more positive than negative, then I did a good job that day. So we should also take confidence in our ability to get things done, our ability to accomplish things. And I remember back when I was in middle school, I didn't think that, I always had this dream of becoming an astronaut, but it was a ridiculous dream for smart kids with great grades. And, it was not something that would ever happen to me. I think it's important to realize that we can achieve our dreams, that we can set out whatever it is we want to do and do it. And at the end of the day, or at the, later in life, I should say, it's not really so important if you actually checked every box of everything you ever wanted to do. What's more important is, did you give it your best shot? Did you try? Because even if you're not successful at those things, you won't be a person who looks back and says, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have done that. It won't cause you any heartache, because you've done it all. It goes back to what I said before about concentrating on the things that we have control over. We don't have any control over the past. We really have control over is what's happening right now, this moment in time. And so we should keep that focus and do the things in this moment in time that are going to help us down the road.
Ron, I know you're on a tight timeline, so I have one last question. Is there a cutting edge technology or field of study that you think will drive the space industry for the next 100 years?
Well, I think anything that has to do with propulsion is going to be really important, because it is way too expensive to launch things into orbit from the surface of the Earth using the present technology. Also, for travel around the solar system and beyond, we're going to need a different form of propulsion. We can't lift chemical rocket fuel from the surface of the Earth and expect that we're going to travel to different stars. But there is a lot of advancements in propulsion technology, especially space-based propulsion technology, which includes things like electrical propulsion using solar energy and other advancements. And I think that's going to be one of the requirements for us to really change the face of space exploration and really make it more commonplace.
That's super interesting. Ron, thank you so much for your time. We cannot say how, I know I told all my friends and family that I was talking to an astronaut today. So I know I speak for everybody on here when we say how excited we are to have you. Our topic this year was about living on the moon. So all of our kids have done a lot of studying on it. And we are just thrilled to have you. And thank you for all you've done, underwater and in the sea. And I think your point about the atmosphere was, that really struck me as an important thing.
Well, thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate it. And good luck to everybody in the competition. Keep up the great work. And I just want to close with, we're going to get through this. This present crisis is, we're going to put it behind us soon. And hopefully you've all been able to find some way to benefit from it. And so good luck with everything.
Thanks, Ron. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.